another episode of Inquiring Minds. I'm Steve Harper, and with me is my incredible co-host, Donna Carlin. How are you doing, Donna?
I'm great. I cannot wait for this conversation.
I get a little nervous every time you say that because it's kind of like, okay, where are we headed? So what are we talking about today?
So this was something that I was thinking of. A complaint is a demand for a solution to a problem.
Ooh.
Think about that for a minute. So the complaint comes from, what does the person want that other people haven't given them? That's pretty much the bottom line. However, when they complain about something, more often than not, people sort of join forces and join the conversation in, oh, you're so right, and this is when it happened to me, and this is when it happened to me, and these people are no good, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing until you have the world of angst.
Yeah.
When was the last time you've witnessed that on social media, or in public, or if you're in the office, the water cooler or
Mm-hmm.
coffee area, um, where a person actually said, that is a great starting point to look for a solution. Let's put our heads together. When is the last time you heard that one?
That would be never. You never hear that, right? At the end of the day, we just went through a pretty major weather event a few months back in our neighborhood. Unprecedented ice that took down a tremendous amount of trees in our neighborhood, and people were overwhelmed. We don't normally get that kind of weather here, and they were looking back to our water district and our refuge supplier to figure out how everybody was going to dispose of this just massive amounts of damaged tree limbs and debris that really were a byproduct of the storm. And we watched it firsthand unfold on our neighborhood social Facebook group, right? Where, the complaints just started mounting, and then, one piles on to the other. And before you know it, it turns out to be this complete complaint session, right? Everybody's, it's a conspiracy theory about what neighborhoods are getting preferential treatment and why we're not. And, there was no into the number of complaints that were being lodged, but nobody offering up a solution, right? At the end of the day. And I put out and got, sort of, beat up a little bit for it, but I said, not waiting for the government to solve our problem. It's just, that's a fool's errand, right? At the end of the day, you're going to have to figure it out yourself. We're cutting up our own debris. We're burning it in our fire pit. Maybe go to Home Depot and get a fire pit and, do the same. And some, sort of followed suit. Our neighbors followed suit and kind of did it. But it was amazing how many people, well, this is ridiculous. And then when the city started to get together a plan and people had already taken care of their stuff, they were actually complaining that they were forced to take care of their stuff before the city came up with a plan, that now somehow they got ripped off, that they had to, we spent, several weekends cleaning this up. Yeah, I'd like that time back as well. But do I put that responsibility on somebody else? No. You see these things all the time, especially with social media. Somebody will, a complaint or an issue will catch fire, whether it be, over an airline or, some sort of, some sort of service that's being, somehow taken away, or a technology that is no longer available. You see these things in a wide variety of areas, and it really just takes fire because you've got one person that's happy to complain and a whole litany of people that are lining up to, continue to vocalize those complaints. But nobody ever really comes to the table with solutions. And that was, this particular topic that you're bringing up, I think is a good way for us to sort of check ourselves. Are we part of the problem, or are we prepared to be part of the solution?
And how many times do we hear that? How many leaders say to their teams, don't come to me with problems and expect me to solve them. Tell me what the problem is and come up with some ideas for a solution. How many
Mm-hmm.
times do they say that? And it's like it falls on deaf ears.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, it's also making assumptions about what you think is fact when you're not considering the full perspective.
Sure.
Take what you just shared, about the ice storm that you had, and the complaints about the city and everything else. As you know, we were hit by a tornado in 2019, and sorry, fall of 2018. And what was amazing was within a weekend, it was all cleaned up.
Mm-hmm.
The city came, they even did stuff on our property that they're not supposed to do to clear the space. However, people complained about all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the fire department cleaned the debris off the street and stuck it on our driveway so I couldn't get my car out. And it was higher than they were. We're talking about massive, massive debris.
Yep.
And so I could have complained because I couldn't get my car out. I said to them, I appreciate that you needed to clear the road so that, first responders could get through. Is there somewhere else you could put the debris other than my driveway? And that's when they realized they just did it instinctively to clear the stuff away, and not realizing that they stopped me from having mobility because I needed to get my car out of the garage. So thankfully it was in the garage, or I wouldn't have a car left. So it's things like that. People have good intentions. If you had an ice storm that you don't usually have, it's not a commonplace thing for the city to figure out.
Right.
They might not even have the equipment to deal with what has to get done, to the extent of, how much damage there was. So if you cut them some slack and say, if you could only do this, at least in the meantime, in the interim, at least it'll take the danger away, or relieve the pressure off my roof, or whatever it is. The rest you could do in the second wave. Whatever it is, how often do you actually give a contribution and an idea to somebody to do something, rather than complain that they're not serving you in the best possible way?
Yeah. Well, that's the problem, is that has become the default for everybody in a lot of ways,
Yes.
to complain as opposed to come up or put, the collective together for a better solution. Just having that one, and I, to be perfectly, fair, I didn't necessarily offer this up. Maybe we should have done this episode a few months ago. But hey, look, rather than complain, maybe, several of us can get together and come up with a solution, or have at least a conversation. But this shouldn't be litigated on social media. This only continues to stir the pot in one way or the other, and it's usually never a good way, right? So I think that would have been a highly profitable means of putting action in, as opposed to actually just complaining and continue to complain. The interesting thing that you said that I find really compelling to talk about is how the leaders say, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. And yet, for leaders out there, and I myself have been accused of that, I've used those exact words, not following up, right? At the end of the day, the only way to hold people accountable is to actually give them the ability to be accountable for it, right? So at the end of the day, it's like, hey, we know we have this problem. I believe that you could come up with some really good solutions. Let's follow up in 2 days, or let's have a meeting at the end of the week, or let's schedule that time so that you can present solutions that you think make sense. Give me the worst case, best case kind of scenarios. I see in a lot of the organizations that I've done work with that don't bring me these problems, just bring me the solutions, but they never bring the solutions because there's no incentive or motivation to do so, because you're not really giving or empowering them to do it. You're telling them to do it, but you're not really saying, okay, here's the next action. And as a good leader, I think, to be blunt, you have to sort of say, yep, you're going to come up with the solutions, but I'm going to come up with, I'm going to give you the floor to present those solutions on such and such date, or we're going to do this follow-up meeting or whatever. And I think that's real critical, because I think that then does incentivize and inspire that person or that group of employees or whatever to really, okay, now we need to put, this is where the rubber meets the road. We need to actually come up with some ideas and thoughts so that we have something legitimate to present when we're asked to present it. I think that's a pretty critical factor. I just see it used way too often where there's no follow through, and people walk away going, well, yeah, I expected no action. I expected no response or no solutions. And So I'll just go back to complaining you know, nothing changes, you know?
So, that's a tactical approach, which is really important. I really believe that it needs to be a systemic approach, that it has to be part of the culture of an organization.
Yep.
One of my favorite TEDsters of all time is Margaret Heffernan, and I'm sure I've spoken about her to you
Yeah.
numerous times, and I've had conversations with her at some of the TED events for the TED community, and telling her how I use one of her talks with pretty much all my clients. And that's the pecking order at work, is one of the TED talks that she's done 3 or 4 now. And part of that is talking about how she actually put the great minds of the people who worked in her company at work to solve a problem in a very unique way. And she was the CEO of the company, and just to literally randomly pick a bunch of people out of the cafeteria and say, go to the table. Didn't matter if they were secretaries or vice
Hmm.
presidents. Here's a problem. I give you 3 hours, come up with a solution. There are no levels here. There's just minds working it out. Okay. I will tell your bosses that you are not going to be back for the rest of the afternoon. Go. And they did.
Hmm.
They had the most amazing time. And it was, how do you use that as a regular occurrence? Now, I understand that you have hierarchy, you have, project managers and plans and all that kind of stuff. And the bigger the company, the more of that exists. What if you had space for these innovative percolating sessions where you actually had somebody bring an issue to the table, and for 3 hours, a random group of people just talked it through?
Yeah.
Not a team that works together all the time, but a random group, fresh minds, fresh perspectives, looking at it from multiple lenses to do it. And what if you did that in your life? How often do you go to your friends to bitch and complain about something that happened with your spouse or your kids or your kids' spouses, whatever it is? And what they do is they commiserate with you and help you feel better. And I understand, where you're coming from. My son did this, or then it mushrooms, right?
Yeah.
And instead said, I'm dealing with this. What suggestions do you have for me to handle it or address it?
Yeah.
And I really need to do something about this. What do you have, up your sleeve? It's a different kind of conversation, and you're asking your close network of people, your relationships, to literally weigh in, not to be, co pissed off with you, but instead to be a sounding board to come up with a solution to make life better.
Yeah, and I think it really comes down to your the way that you communicate, right? Like at the end of the day, like you said, if you're just going to be pissed off and angry and you use your interaction to just unload on whatever that situation is to your friend or your colleague or whatever, well, they sort of follow the guide you give them, right? So if that's
Yeah.
where it is, then of course it's easy to pile on and complain from their perspective. Oh my gosh, yep, I've done that, or my kids have done that, and now you're into this, non-productive spinning of wheels that tends to happen. Where I differentiate and I often kind of guide my clients to look is that you can turn that on a dime based on how you set the story in motion. You're someone I trust and admire. You're a good problem solver. You're an excellent listener. You're an excellent thinker on your feet in terms of, ideas and solutions. And I have this problem that I just cannot seem to get my head around. I need your input. Now, all of a sudden, you have just elevated that person in their own confidence, mind you, but you're putting them up on a pedestal, and almost everybody wants to show up with their A game when you do that, which means as opposed to bitching and complaining, I'm now coming at you with, well, have you thought about this? Or, this is something that we tried that worked really well. Or let's sit down and have that conversation and really brainstorm around it. It sets a much deeper conversation in motion that really has a significant outcome rather than, just the default. And I think, and we talk a lot about this and a lot of these questions that we pose, a lot of these topics that we've had for inquiring minds are really designed to get you to get beyond the fluff and the surface level and really dig in to the deeper, more meaningful interactions. And this is a perfect opportunity to do that, because it's a way for you to and by the way, a lot of times when you actually point those out to a colleague or a friend, the relationship will never go back to the way it was. It's always going to be greatly improved and enhanced, because you've given permission for it to grow in that regard. And that's what I love about that approach, is the ability for you to be able to take it. And when you are really committed to being present and a willing participant in that regard, you'll actually get some really good solutions. You'll get some very good perspectives and input from the people that you really do trust and admire. And it will have an impact like you won't ever believe. And that's why I think when let's say the boss hears the complaint and says, okay, like Ms. Heffernan said, hey, go work on this project or this issue for 3 hours and let's get back together. There is a certain level of cachet that's being placed in your ability to help us figure out the solution. And that has a huge impact on culture, and you could turn your corporate culture on a dime if you started doing these things, rather than you being as the leader or the executive team, in your lofty perches coming up with the strategies and ideas. You're operating in a vacuum, oftentimes really distant from what's actually occurring at the lower depths of the organization. And that's where the meat is, and that's where some of the best solutions reside. And I love how she brought everybody from different roles and responsibilities, because everybody brings a unique perspective. And when you create the environment, you set the table for everyone to have equal contribution, you'll come up with some really good solutions. And so whether you're leading an organization or whether you're just trying to get your kid to go to bed on time, figuring out these problems are the solutions are at your fingertips. They're really, part of an extended connection to the people you surround yourself with.
For sure. Absolutely. It's fascinating how, like, I'm just going to invite our listeners to look at how we frame things. We need to be able to vent to people. There's no question. So if you vent to your friend, to your colleague, to your spouse, whatever it is, finish the venting with, how could I turn this around?
Mm-hmm. That's a great phrase.
So again, you could let off some steam, and then you can engage the other person to partner with you to figure it out.
Yeah, that's good. Really good. Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like we've been really bringing the heat these last several episodes. I mean, there's so many different ways we could take these last ones and continue to add add additional conversation around it. So we may have to do a follow up on this one as well. But Donna, how can people, share what their perception of this episode is, what they took from it, how they might change their approach going forward? We'd love to hear from our audience as to, their reaction to this particular topic.
Well, join our Facebook group, Inquiring Minds with Donna Carlin and Steve Harper. Let us know your tricks of the trade. How do you engage people around you to help you come up with solutions? And do you actually try them? I want to hear that too.
Yeah.
Do people give great ideas and you thank them and then you keep doing the same thing in the same way? And where does that get you? So I would love to hear both, sides of the coin, so to speak. Join the conversation. Let us know if you want us to go deeper or talk about something completely different. We would love to hear. It would,
Absolutely.
Just join the fray, so to speak.
Absolutely. And don't forget to follow us individually, donnacarlin.com, Carlin with a K. And then my website is Ripple Central as well. We'd love to not only hear what your thoughts are on this episode or any of the episodes, but, we certainly invite you to reach out to us individually and continue the conversation, or make your comments on Facebook or on YouTube. And we pay attention to those and we'll respond to those as well. And so, we invite you to participate any way you can. We're just grateful that you've arrived here at this show, and the feedback we've been getting from our audience and our listeners has been phenomenal. So we are so grateful for your time and for the opportunity to have these conversations. So we will be back again very soon with a new episode of Inquiring Minds. But until then, Donna, have a great day.
You too.